everybody loves an underdog, right? I think it's because we all kind of think of ourselves as the underdog. Everybody loves the uphill climb, and from small to big, like we love the story of it. There's a guy named Charles Schwab that was the quintessential underdog. This guy came from nothing, very humble beginnings, and yet he rose to lead two of the biggest U.S. steel companies. He rose to global prominence, becoming one of the most powerful industrialists in the Gilded Age. Not only that, he was bold. He was charismatic. He was a visionary. He built vast fortunes, but he never built restraint. This is a man who's remembered with a company that has his name, Charles Schwab Financial, $158 billion company. But yet, that's a misleading end to the story. See, Charles amassed great wealth, and Charles pursued immense pleasure, and he became influential to those who were the influential ones. But yet, in 1939, Charles died penniless, alone in an apartment, after the Great Depression had ripped everything from him. And it said that as he looked back with pride and not much sorrow, he said, "I was the most foolish man who ever lived." The reality is that if he had died earlier, with all the money bags surrounding him, it really wouldn't have changed anything. That Charles wrestled with, in an extreme example, something we all wrestle with. What is the point if I'm just going to lose it all? What is the purpose if it's all going to get taken from me? Either by economic tragedy or by death itself. What is the point if it all gets taken from me? Ecclesiastes asks us the hard questions. As we look through this passage this morning, it's going to force us. The preacher, the author of this, calls himself the preacher, King Solomon. He's going to ask us these hard questions, and he's going to force us to say, look, you think that's how the world works, huh? You think that's the answer, huh? Well, let's follow this to the end. If you believe that philosophy of life, that wisdom of how you're going to live, it's really going to work that way, then let's see where it goes. And he forces us to test against the metal if it will really work. See, we all have philosophies of life. We all say, this is how the world works, and therefore this is how I'm going to work in the world. It makes up our matrix of how we make decisions and what we decide is best and good and right. It changes how we view people and opportunities. It informs us of what we should prioritize and love the most. But not always are we honest about where it ends. And Ecclesiastes is going to force us. The preacher is going to force us to our logical conclusion. If you think this is going to work out for you, then let's see where it goes. He's kind of like that crusty old grandpa, you know? Guy that's going to let you hurt yourself a little bit before he shows you how to use it the right way. He's going to, let's see where you want this to go. Let's take a look at some of these observations that the preacher makes about life. Ecclesiastes 1, starting in verse 12, we're going to read through 15 here. He says this, I, the teacher, or the preacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem. I applied my mind to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under the heavens. What a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. I've seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless. A chasing after the wind. What is crooked cannot be straightened, and what is lacking cannot be counted. This is almost a summary statement. He looks out at everything and he says, look, I kind of know quite a lot about quite a lot, and I can tell you that this system itself is broken. The pieces that you have, you can't make this work. You can't force this work. He's saying, look, you look at the world and it's a lemon. You bought a lemon. It's not going to work. You ever bought a lemon? Sorry, you ever bought a Ford? It doesn't matter. You fix something, something else goes. I had a wise man tell me that Ford circles all their problems in blue, you know? It's turned out to be true. You have a lemon. This life is a lemon. It doesn't work how it's supposed to work. You can't fix it. You can't straighten what it is. You don't have that control. You don't have that power. You don't even know what you're missing. Even if you had everything, you wouldn't have the answer of how to fix it. Look, he has this phrase here where he says, under the sun. I've tried all these things under the sun. That's an important phrase. It runs throughout the whole book. What he's talking about is this world itself is under the sun. The life you're trying to live is under the sun. And as you live your life under the sun, what you really come to conclude is, I wish I had a life that was above the sun. This earthly place, the way things work here, it's almost as if it's not supposed to be that way. There's a heavenly desire for something to be clear, for something to be intentional, for something to be meaningful. And yet under the sun, these things fade. We wish we could have a life above the sun. And we can't figure it out. But we keep trying. Look, he's going to walk us through a couple of these things. Look at verse 16. He says, I said to myself, look, I have increased in wisdom more than anyone who has ruled over Jerusalem before me. I have experienced much of wisdom and knowledge. Then I applied myself to the understanding of wisdom and also of madness and folly, but I learned that this too is chasing after the wind. For with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. This idea here, he says, some of us think if we just knew a little more, if I was just a little smarter, if I just had a little more experience, if I just understood things a little bit clearer, then I could finally fix it. And he said, I actually happen to be the smartest guy in the room everywhere I go. I happen to know. I have ascended to the heights of knowledge, of academia, whatever you want to call it. And he says, the view from up there doesn't get any better. Just because I know more doesn't make it better. In fact, I just happen to know more about how things are broken. You ever read the news? You glad you know more about the world now? You're not. The more you find out, it's just more broken than you knew. It doesn't work. This doesn't work. So apparently, just grasping wisdom, just understanding more, just rooting down further in what you can study here, or certainly there's value there, but it doesn't solve the problem. He's actually going to argue about that value in a few verses. But look, what does he try next? Chapter 2, verse 1, he says, what about self-indulgence? Chapter 2, verse 1, he said, I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is madness. And what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives. He says, let's try to party it away. Maybe that would work. And you better believe this guy knows how to party. Currently the richest man in the world, currently the most technologically advanced man in the world, has all the resource, had no limit to his budget, is in all the most powerful circles in the world. Yeah, this guy knows how to throw a party. And he does. And he gets to the end of that, and really, honestly, I think this is something people secretly believe. A lot of people secretly believe that if I didn't have these limitations, maybe it's my morality, maybe it's my commitments, maybe it's my responsibilities, if I didn't have that and I truly was able to fully just experience pleasure, I honestly would become satisfied. And he said, I did that. I went down that road. And it is meaningless. It is empty. It's madness. It ends nowhere. It doesn't satisfy. It gives you nothing. You either end up just trying to forget, or you end up like Diddy. That's it. That's where it goes. These people who try, and they end up empty, evil, horrible, debauchery of nothingness. That's it. That's where you will end. nothingness. So he moves on. All right, what if it wasn't that? What if it was enterprise? What if I was to truly accomplish and just break through the chains? I mean, just massive things. Things people have never done before. Objectively incredible accomplishments. What about that? That's where he goes. Look at verse 4. I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. Now I know that for a lot of us, you're like, yeah, he's pretty involved in gardening. This is beyond what existed. He's creating technology. He's creating markets. He's creating economic engines that did not exist before him in the most aggressive and hard to conquer capital of the world, which would be agriculture. As a market itself, that's the most important one, right? You need food. And at this point, it was even harder to get. He's building reservoirs. He's gardening the desert. He's flourishing in an economy and in a location that had never had this before. This is incredible. The guy is a genius. But it keeps going. It keeps going here. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers and a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this, my wisdom stayed with me. He's saying, look, not only did he do these things and they were pretty incredible just objectively, he did them and they were massively successful. He didn't just invent some cool thing. He applied it to the real world. He came out on top as the most enterprising individual in the world. Massive success. He is a genius, and he is now the wealthiest genius. It worked. He got there. He reached the pinnacle. It's not just wealth. It's not just fast money. This is just legacy wealth. This is kingdom-building wealth. This is put you on the map. Top of the world moments. So that should work, right? Getting there should work. And he says, I did all this with wisdom. I did all this thinking. I did all this committed to the idea, committed to the project. Here, I'm sure I will find what I'm looking for. He didn't accidentally happen into this. This should do it. And the answer is no. Look at verse 10 and 11. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. Now just pause there for a second. Some of us who tend toward workaholism need to focus on this verse a little bit. Because we get ahead of ourselves, and we talk about if I can finish this, if I can build this, if I can get there, then if I can do this, the work itself, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm pouring my heart into it, and then it's going to be great. And you reach the end, and he looks back and said, it was nothing. It turns out the best reward I got for everything I put in was at least I enjoyed it while I did it. That is not a good return. And this categorizes a huge amount of people who reach retirement, either intentionally or forced, and they can no longer do what they used to do. But because they had all their hope wrapped up in doing and in being able to succeed, that they reach that point and they say, there's nothing here now. I thought that there would be more. I had this long career. I had this success. I had these things leading up, and I finally get here and I can't do it anymore. And now I'm nothing. Verse 11, yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. At the end of it all you get is the work. If you're being honest, at the end of it all you get was the work. I gave myself to it, and stepping back, and when I'm looking clearly, I haven't moved the needle. With riches and with renown and with absolute accomplishment, I have nothing. That's where we get argumentative. Well, at least he did something, right? We're still talking about him now, aren't we? It's a pretty good argument. But you're not smarter than the preacher. He expects that. Look what he says. Verse 12. Then I turned my thoughts to consider wisdom, and also madness and folly. What more can the king's successor do than what has already been done? In other words, what's the point? Did I personally, actually do anything? I saw that wisdom is better than folly, just as light is better than darkness. The wise have eyes in their heads, but while the fool walks in darkness. But I came to realize that the same fate overtakes them both. So we say at the front end, hold on. There's got to be some value here. I mean, you are doing some good things. There has to be some value in what you brought. And he said, you know what? I guess when I'm being really critical, it is better. It is better to be wise than it is to be a fool. There are some paths that are less worse. You're right. He said, but then I argued back to myself and I said, hold on. Neither of them are good enough to get out of death. They both end the same way. Verse 15, then I said to myself, the fate of the fool will overtake me also. What then do I gain by being wise? And I said to myself, this too is meaningless. For the wise, like the fool, will not be long remembered. The days have already come when both have been forgotten. Like the fool, the wise too must die. Think about this. The wise too must die. Look, we all are going to experience this. You work through life, you intensely pursue things, and they're not bad in and of themselves, but at the end of it, you die. Even if you did do immense, incredible things. Even if you did accomplish more than what you even set out to do. He gets to a conclusion here. If you operate with this philosophy, if you take this bad philosophy that says, I'm going to do it, I'm going to build this up, I'm going to choose this, I'm going to go for it, I'm going to be successful enough, I'm going to have enough pleasure, I'm going to have enough knowledge, I myself will make life matter. If you believe that, he says it leads to one particular place. This is the conclusion. And I'll be honest with you, it's not fun. It's not fun. But as somebody who has been there, and I imagine a number of us in this room have been there, we get to the end, we get to this conclusion, and this is all we have. Verse 17. So I hated life, because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it is meaningless. A chasing after the wind. If you put this weight on your shoulders, then the very thing that you try to do to give meaning is going to sink you deeper. He says this can't work. If you're going to live life and base it on how smart you can get and how much fun you can have and how successful you can become, if you put that in the center, you will hate it. Life itself will begin to have no meaning to you. Maybe not immediately, maybe not all at once, but eventually, everything that you built will turn to dust and be swept away by someone you don't know. That's the truth. That's the truth. We all live this. This is the reality that we go and we build and we try and we accumulate, and then guess what? We die, we give it to our kids. And they pick a few things, but then they go through the house with different colored stickers. And then other strangers walk through the house and they buy this for 25 cents and that for 50 cents. And then the majority rest of it gets boxed up and put in a dump. And then guess what? They sell the house. And some other young, good-to-do couple comes in, and all that shiplap that you picked out, and all those colors that you so perfectly balanced, and all that flooring you laid down, and all the memories that are scratched into the wall, they get painted over and ripped out. They end up in somebody's burn pile. And they don't care about what you designed in your house. They don't care about why it worked that way. They're going to still rip out the walls because they prefer a different philosophy of house. And they forget you. It's meaningless. And so if you are saying, no, I'll be different, the preacher is here to remind you that you won't. You're not that special. Listen, he's going to prove it. Verse 18. I hated all the things that I had toiled for under the sun, because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. And who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish. Yet they will have control over all the fruits of my toil, into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. So my heart began to despair over all my toilsome labor under the sun. For a person may labor with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then they must leave all they own to another who has not toiled for it. This too is meaningless and a great misfortune. What do people get for all the toil and anxious striving with which they labor under the sun? All their days, their work is grief and pain. Even at night, their minds do not rest. This too is meaningless. It's going to go. It's going to go. It's going to get taken. And you worked so hard for it, and it kept you up at night, and you strived after it during the day, and guess what? It's gone. Somebody else is going to inherit it and part it off. This is what's going to happen. Think about all the things that you've accomplished. Do they matter in 100 years? How about 1,000? Well, you've done this last week. They're going to be impacted by it 2,500 years from now? No. It all fades. So fast. So fast. The logical conclusion is that this bad philosophy is an emptiness that haunts your soul. And I know the argument is like, well, I don't feel that way. I don't feel haunted by that. Well, here's the thing. There's a lot of times in here where he felt all right. He's having all those parties. I mean, there were times in there, this was okay. This was going well. It felt like in the moment, the applause he got, the recognition he got, the experiences he had, these were worth it. These are sort of working. But not when they stop. See, because then the void comes. Then it's a deafening silence. And some of us who have had to stop this or that, for whatever reason, we get some distance and we realize, oh no, it was all meaningless. Nothing would last. And if I'm being honest, none of those things can answer these hard questions. By the time we get to 24, 20 through 26, these last verses, he's beating us pretty good. Feeling pretty down and out about it. It's kind of sad, right? Really rained on our parade. Put some burrs in our saddle. Really deflated our balloon. It's tough. You know what's interesting, though, is there's just this tiny little bit of hope he gives us. Just sprinkles it in. Just at the end, there's just one beam of hopeful sunlight that comes through. But before I give it to you, I got to get kind of nerdy with you for a minute. There's this movement in here that I really want to show you. I really want to look at this with you, but you got to put on your Bible nerd glasses or whatever. I want to talk to you about something really interesting in here it's a part of what's called textual criticism, looking at the text itself and being critical of the manuscripts. Now, here's the thing. The Bible is extremely reliable. The Bible is extremely reliable in its translation and how we've carried it through its transmission across the years. We have over 5,000 New Testament manuscripts and fragments, more than any other historical document. We have over 17,000 Old Testament manuscripts and fragments. I mean, just an incredible amount, overwhelming amount, eons ahead of any other ancient literature. So it's extremely reliable, but in some of these manuscripts, there's these little differences, these little slight differences. And over the 99.9% of the time, everything agrees. There's a small percentage where some things are different. And it might be a different word, it might be a different letter. And of those times, it's very, very, very few that actually matter in the sense that They just added an extra letter here. We can tell what they were saying. It doesn't change the meaning. But there's a few where that slight difference could lead to a slightly different interpretation. Nothing ever that has to do with salvation in terms of effect, but sometimes there's these areas with it. And this is one of them. Verse 25 is one of them. In the last word of verse 25, in your translation, it has this word, right? Memenu, which roughly translates to more than him, okay? Now, in the older manuscripts, and what I would argue are the more reliable manuscripts, you would have memini, right? So you see the last letter, which Hebrew reads backwards from what we read. So you have to start on the one side, go to the other side. And you see how there's like this one difference between the letters, right? It's either an apostrophe or it's an apostrophe with a tail. So you can imagine if you're scrolling along and you're a good old Hebrew scholar and you got your big beard and it's getting in your way and you can imagine that you're going pretty quick. You could easily add that dash, make it too long, or you could accidentally have skipped it thinking you made it long enough, you didn't. So this is a very, what we would call a typo, right? Well, you ready for this? An orthographic deviation. You throw that one out there next time you send something on the wrong text. Orthographic deviation. So the question is it more than him or is it more than I? Now, here's why this matters. It doesn't matter immensely across the whole thing, but I do think this is important here. Is Solomon, the preacher, is he writing about how God allows us to take great pleasure in the things he gives us? Or is he saying, I should have been able to find the pleasure myself? It does slightly change how we approach this passage. Okay? Now, here's what I mean. Follow me on this. This is a pretty literal interpretation or translation of this passage. Would read something like this. There is nothing better than for a man to eat and drink and to show his soul good in his toil. Now, again, very literal, but just think about that language. There's nothing better than if you were to be able to eat and you were to be able to drink and you were able to work, and as you did this, you said, this makes sense. Like my soul is enjoying it. This life is good for my soul. He's saying there's nothing better than that. That would make sense, wouldn't it? That God's design would be as you live, as you eat, as you drink, as you work, you're like, this makes sense. I'm enjoying God in his creation. I'm enjoying how he's designed me. This makes sense. He's saying there's nothing better than that. And here's that translation difference, verse 25. For who can eat and enjoy more than I? This is what he's saying. I think it makes sense. I think it would be the best thing that we would live life and enjoy that, because that makes sense. It would come from God. And if anybody should have been able to figure that out, it should have been me. Who could have better parties than me? Who could have more incredible success than me? Who could break the end of the earth and just keep going more than I have? Nobody. And here's the hope. For to the one who pleases God, he gives wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner, he gives the toil to gather and then give it all to the one who pleases God. This too is vanity and a chasing of the wind. Think about this for a second. He's saying, look, I've lived all these things. I've tried all these things. It should work. If anybody should have figured out the key to this, it should have been me. He says, but I look out there, and there's a type of person who has figured it out. I see two different types of people. There's a person who's living, who pleases God, and that person is getting the wisdom. They are getting the knowledge. They are finding the joy. They are making it work. And yet there's this other person, the sinner, this person who's far from God. That person is struggling through life. I can see two people living in the same world with the same scenarios, and one of them finds meaning and the other doesn't. You hear the hope in there? That means that there's a way. That means, so the question is, what is that guy's philosophy? How is that woman doing this? How are they living life and finding meaning and pulling out hope in places where everyone else is dying of despair? There has to be something different about these people. They are doing the same things and finding meaning. They are doing the same things and leaving full instead of empty. They are living the same lives, and yet out of those lives comes joy instead of despair. Let's put some feet on this. There is a kind of woman who does not have to mourn her children growing up. There is a kind of man who can retire off of his work, and he isn't defeated by his inability to do what he once did. There is a person who is not waylaid by tragedy. There is a person who is not completely destroyed when the life as they pictured it is taken from them. There is a kind of person that is walking around learning and enjoying and building in life just the same way that I am, but somehow they're getting different results. Who is this person? What's the philosophy that they're using? They live under the sun, but yet they act like they're above the sun. They're living this life. How can they still have a hope that isn't crushed by death? Fast forward to the New Testament. The Apostle Paul writes to a church in the town of Corinth. He writes this letter and he talks about all sorts of things specific about unity and holiness and being together as God's people in love. But when you get to chapter 15, there's this extreme, deep conversation about what it means that Jesus came back to life. And really, the main pivotal point of that chapter is that if it didn't happen, if Jesus didn't come back to life, we would be stuck in meaningless. We would be stuck in mist. We'd be stuck in vanity. We would be stuck in wind. That's all we would have. There's this reality that if Jesus didn't come back from the dead, we would be who the preacher's warning about. Here's the hope. Here's the philosophy. Here's where these things come together. Paul gets to the end of chapter 15, and he applies that truth. He says, look, the resurrection is real, which means something real for your life. It means you live different now. He says this in verses 57 on. But thanks be to God who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. So then, dear brothers and sisters, be firm. Do not be moved. Always be outstanding in the work of the Lord. Ready? This is it. Knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. Knowing that the work, knowing that the toil, knowing that what you live is not in vain because Jesus defeated death. The fact that he is alive means that these things that he works in through us cannot be taken away. Another way to say it would be this: the life of Jesus breathes life into my everyday life. The life of Jesus breathes life into my everyday life. Not just big moments, not just one time, not just a feeling I got. My everyday decisions, my resources, my moments, my opportunities. Jesus is alive, which means what we do matters. The life of Jesus, actually active and in controlling power of the universe, gives eternal meaning to our temporary choices. That should be encouraging. You don't look encouraged, but it should be encouraging. Coming off of Ecclesiastes, that dude's a bummer. It's not toil. It's not vanity. It's not nothing. No. In Jesus, this is something. It can have meaning. There are people that the preacher was talking about who understand this. That their labor isn't in vain. It has meaning. Their moments, their days don't stack up into nothing. They matter, that God will work through them. Listen, life isn't meaningless because Jesus gives it meaning. Life isn't empty because Jesus fills it. It's not wasted because he redeems it. That is the purpose. That is the joy. That is the life that we live in Jesus. And time becomes an asset. It's not a countdown anymore. It's not an impending doom that you have. You better do that before you get older. You better do that. Better get it done. Oh, you wasted it. It's gone now. It's not impending. It's now an asset given to us. Pleasure becomes purposeful. No longer something shameful and hidden and taking away the value of other relations. No. used correctly, this is now mattering. It now builds up life. They don't anchor us down. Money is not this shameful thing. It's not something I have to keep and sink my teeth into. This is a tool that he's given me for impact. Just think about the ramifications of this. My everyday, when lived in Jesus, can matter forever. That's what it means. Just a little, okay, you can weld for eternity. You can be a nurse with heavenly perspective. Like the dishes that get done, the conversation that you have, this is just a comment. No. This is the love of God transforming me to have a moment in their life that when done in Jesus will always be good. It will always matter. It will always be a part of what God is doing. The littlest things, God's working in. Jesus is breathing life into these places that we assumed were forgotten, were nothing. He's giving us purpose and meaning. This is what it is like to live as people with whom God is pleased. Remember, that's how he said it. The people whom God is pleased. That's who lives with this knowledge and wisdom and joy, which means the question lands on you. Do you think God is pleased with you? Do you think God is pleased with you? It's a moment that's serious. It's a moment you need to consider, because the only way that God would be pleased with you and me, the only way that he would look at us and see an innocent child, is if someone were to take our guilt from us and give us their innocence instead. That is the good news of Jesus. That's the good news of his death. It's the good news of his resurrection, that the meaning of life is restored to us in him. Here's what needs to happen. You need to have a Charles Schwab moment. You need to look back and recognize, I have been the biggest fool. Because in that moment, you are able to say, forgive me. Here's the thing, you have to ask for it. You have to ask for it. 1 John says it this way. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just and will forgive us our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness. If we confess, if we recognize that is right, I am wrong, God, help me. He will swap our unrighteousness for his righteousness and rescue us into a life of meaning. Rescue us away from the vanity and the emptiness. The life of Jesus breathed into the lifeless parts that you've dragged around forever. This is joy. This is purpose. This is meaning and dignity restored. But you need to ask. And maybe that's the first time where you have a moment of being welcomed in the family of God. Or maybe you've been doing this for a while and you recognize, God, I have forgotten some things. I have wandered. Forgive me. I have been the biggest fool. And in those moments, you are welcomed home. You are given restored meaning and purpose. This text is a call to have more meaning in your life as you live it with Jesus. This text is a call to walk with him, to trust him with everything you have, because Jesus has more for you. And if you thirst for it, if you ask for it in faith, then the life of Jesus will breathe that life into your everyday. Things will begin to make sense.